Imagine you're standing in front of a beautiful old brick cottage.
Oh, yeah, the classic look.
Right. It's covered in that classic lush green ivy. And it just looks timeless, you know?
Absolutely.
It looks so stable, like it's been there for 100 years, and it's going to be there for 100 more. But what you're actually looking at is, well, it's a slow-motion biological demolition site.
It really is.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are unpacking a really fascinating stack of sources from John Constantine. He's an arboriculture expert from tree service perfection out in West Covina, California.
Which is a very specific environment, yeah.
Exactly. And while his field notes focus heavily on Southern California, the mission of our deep dive today is to extract the universal, slightly terrifying biology and physics of what is really happening in your backyard.
Yeah, and reading through these notes, it really shifts your perspective. I mean, proper landscape management isn't just about aesthetics or, making things look pretty for the neighbor.
But that's way deeper than that.
It requires this fundamental understanding of biology and even structural physics. There's this hidden, sometimes brutal competition for resources that defines the natural world right outside our doors.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that aesthetic appeal you mentioned, that's exactly how this turf war always begins, isn't it?
Pretty much every time, yeah.
People intentionally plant these creeping vines because they want that established Ivy League aesthetic. But I'm looking at these field notes, and it seems like these vines aren't just passively resting against a wall.
Not at all.
So how are they actually holding on? Because if I'm picturing, like, little suction cups just stuck to the brick, it's really hard to see how that causes any real structural damage.
Yeah, the suction cup idea is a super common misconception. Vines like ivy, they actively attach themselves to vertical surfaces using these microscopic appendages.
Like tiny roots.
Exactly, they're called aerial rootlets. And they don't just grip the surface, they actually act more like biological chisels.
Biological chisels, wow.
Yeah, these tiny rootlets actively seek out microscopic pores, hairline fractures, and tiny imperfections in porous materials. So things like mortar, wood siding, stucco.
So they're feeling around for a way in.
Right. And once they find a tiny crevice, they grow directly into it.
So they're actively embedding themselves into the wall itself.
Deep into it, yeah.
It reminds me of how a pothole forms in the winter. Water gets into a tiny crack in the asphalt. It freezes, it expands, and then it slowly just pushes the street apart. Is the plant doing that same kind of mechanical weathering?
That is the exact mechanism. It's just driven by biology rather than ice.
That is wild.
Right. As the vine continues to grow, those microscopic rootlets that are embedded in your mortar naturally thicken and expand.
Which creates pressure.
Exactly. That biological growth exerts a constant outward pressure from inside the microscopic pores of the masonry or the wood. So over years, it literally wedges those materials apart. It crumbles mortar, it splits siding.
Just ripping the house apart in slow motion.
Yeah.
And according to the sources, there's a secondary attack happening at the exact same time. Like, the physical wedging is bad enough, but these vines sort of bring their own weather system with them.
Oh, the moisture trap. Yeah, this is huge. A dense layer of mature ivy acts like a heavy, waterproof blanket draped over the side of a structure.
Because the leaves are so thick.
Right. It completely blocks sunlight and wind from ever reaching the wall. So when it rains, or, even just after heavy morning dew, that moisture gets trapped directly against the siding or the masonry.
With nowhere to go.
None. There's no way for it to evaporate.
Which means the wall is basically just sitting in a permanent, damp microclimate.
Exactly. And over time, that constant dampness creates the literal perfect breeding ground for wood-rotting fungi and really severe structural decay.
So the house is rotting beneath the plants.
The building's exterior literally begins to rot from the outside in. And the crazy part is, because the foliage is so thick and beautiful, the property owner doesn't even see the catastrophic damage until the vines are finally removed.
It's totally hidden.
What's fascinating here is how the local environment acts as a force multiplier for this biological destruction. The sources really emphasize the climate of West Covina.
Right, because it has incredibly mild winters and pretty much year-round sunshine.
Exactly. So there's no biological off switch.
Right, Ben.
In colder climates, a hard winter freeze forces vegetation into dormancy. The vines lose their leaves, the sap stops flowing, and that structural expansion just pauses for a few months.
It takes a break.
But in mild climates, the plants never sleep.
Never sleep. That's a creepy way to put it.
But it's true. The cellular division is continuous and relentless. So a small, intentional patch of ground cover can escalate into a massive, property-spanning canopy invasion in just a few short seasons.
Because the growth compounds without any interruption.
Exactly.
Okay, so once that vine has conquered the static wall and maximized its sunlight there, it needs a taller host. Which brings us to the next phase of this turf war. The sources detail what happens when these creeping vines move from inanimate objects like houses to living giants.
The mature oaks and pines.
Right.
This is where the competition for resources shifts from structural damage to flat-out biological warfare.
Warfare.
Yeah. A vine naturally seeks the highest point possible to capture sunlight. So when it reaches the base of a mature tree, it treats that trunk as a vertical superhighway.
Just a ladder to the sky.
Exactly. But as it climbs, it also expands its root system below ground. It's competing directly in the soil for the exact same water and nutrients the host tree needs to survive.
Okay, I have to push back on this a bit, or at least, play devil's advocate for the listener. Because intuitively, a mature oak tree is massive.
Oh, they're huge.
Right. It has a root system that goes deep, deep into the earth. So how does a relatively thin, creeping vine actually manage to outcompete a 40-foot tree for water?
It's a war of attrition, really, and it relies entirely on the architecture of the root systems.
How so?
Well, a mature oak does have deep tap roots, sure, but it also relies heavily on a network of much shallower feeder roots to capture rainwater. The ivy's root system, on the other hand, is incredibly dense, highly fibrous, and sits right at the surface. So when it rains, the ivy's roots intercept that surface moisture before it can ever percolate down to the tree's feeder roots.
Oh, wow. So the vine is essentially drinking the tree's water before the tree even gets a chance.
Exactly. The tree gets bypassed completely.
So the tree is operating on a continuous hydration deficit. It's just constantly thirsty.
Constantly.
But the underground theft is only half the battle, right? Because the sources describe something called a foliage canopy blockade.
Right. Remember, the vine's biological imperative is to capture sunlight. That's why it's climbing in the first place.
Right, the vertical superhighway.
As it climbs the trunk and reaches the branches of the host tree, it continues to spread its own leaves. And because the vine's leaves are designed to be these incredibly efficient solar panels, they naturally layer themselves over the host tree's foliage.
Like a tarp.
Exactly like a tarp. They literally intercept the sunlight, casting the oak's own leaves into deep shade.
So the tree is being starved of water from the bottom and starved of sunlight from the top.
Yes.
Which means it basically shuts down its ability to photosynthesize and feed itself.
And prolonged starvation completely compromises the tree's immune system. Just like a severely malnourished human, a starved tree simply cannot expend energy to fight off infection.
It's too weak.
Its natural chemical defenses drop. And that invites secondary attacks like fungal diseases and aggressive pest infestations to just move right in.
Man. And beyond the biological starvation, the sources emphasize a sheer physics problem too, like the actual physical weight of the vine itself.
This is something people consistently underestimate. The mass of dense plant matter is shocking. Mature, established vines are incredibly heavy.
Especially when they're wet, I assume.
Oh, exactly. When they're holding water after a storm, they add massive unnatural weight to branches. And remember, those branches were structurally engineered by the tree to only carry the weight of its own leaves.
Not thousands of pounds of wet ivy.
Right. So when strong winds roll through, that dense wall of ivy acts like a giant sail.
Oh, I see.
It catches the kinetic energy of the wind, overloads the tensile strength of the oak's branches, and easily snaps them.
Just breaks them right off. So if you're a homeowner and you walk out into your yard and you realize your massive tree is being strangled and weighed down like this, your first instinct is going to be to grab some heavy-duty gardening shears, grab the vines, and just start ripping them down.
Oh, yeah. That's what everyone wants to do.
But the sources explicitly warn against this.
Yeah, that is the classic DIY disaster.
Why is it a disaster?
Well, remember the mechanics of those tiny aerial rootlets we discussed earlier? The ones that embed themselves deep into the pores of whatever they're climbing?
The biological chisels.
Exactly. They have a literal death grip on the host tree. So when you aggressively yank an established vine off a tree trunk, you aren't just removing the ivy.
What else are you taking?
You are ripping off vital protective layers of the tree's bark. You are creating massive open wounds right on the trunk that expose the inner wood to disease.
Oh, wow. And I guess if you're ripping it off your siding, you were taking chunks of your house with it.
Exactly. Mortar, paint, wood chips, all of it.
But even if you manage to just cut the vine without actually pulling it down,
Yeah.
the sources describe a phenomenon they call the Hydra effect.
The Hydra effect is fascinating and super frustrating for homeowners. Cutting the visible surface foliage does almost nothing to the organism as a whole.
Because of the roots.
Right. The root system, hidden beneath the soil, acts as this massive energy vault. So when you cut off the top of the vine, sure, you remove the leaves, but you leave behind a massive root system fully loaded with stored starches.
So the plant realizes it just lost its solar panels, basically, and goes into emergency mode.
Exactly. The sudden loss of the top growth removes the chemical hormones that naturally suppress new shoots. Without that suppression, the root system just flushes all its stored energy into thousands of dormant buds. The plant triggers rapid regrowth, and it often returns significantly thicker, more aggressive, and harder to kill than it was before you cut it.
Like cutting off the head of the Hydra. 2 more grow bags.
Exactly where the name comes from.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. A logical person might think, okay, pulling it causes damage, and cutting it makes it angry. I'll just go to the hardware store, buy a chemical herbicide, and spray all the leaves on the wall.
It seems like the obvious solution.
Right. But the sources explain exactly why surface-level chemical warfare fails. It comes down to the microscopic biology of the leaf itself. And I love this analogy. It's basically like trying to wash a waterproof jacket with a garden hose.
It really...
The water just beads right off.
The waterproof jacket analogy perfectly captures the biology at play. Mature ivy leaves have evolved this specialized, thick, waxy coating called a cuticle. Yeah. And in nature, that waxy armor is an evolutionary defense mechanism. It's actually designed to seal moisture inside the leaf during intense summer heat.
So it doesn't dry out.
Right. But it also acts as a near-perfect repellent for liquid herbicides. The chemicals simply bounce off, or they just wash away into the dirt.
So you're not even hurting the plant.
Not at all. You end up severely poisoning the surrounding soil and groundwater while doing zero damage to the actual vine.
So how do you actually kill it? Because the sources break down different species of vines, and it sounds like knowing exactly what kind of biological weapon you are fighting dictates your entire strategy.
It absolutely does. You have to bypass that waterproof jacket entirely. But the urgency and the specific method really depend on the species.
Right.
For instance, the sources contrast a critical threat like English ivy with a moderate threat like Boston ivy.
What's the difference?
Well, English ivy is a heavy, aggressive strangler. It has an incredibly fast growth rate. It requires immediate professional eradication. Boston ivy, on the other hand, is mostly just a masonry threat.
Because it climbs differently.
Yeah, it uses specialized adhesive pads rather than burrowing rootlets, so it doesn't strangle trees in the exact same way, but it still requires careful pruning.
And then there's Algerian ivy, which the notes say is a high threat, needing repeated basal cutting, and poison oak, which is a low structural threat but a massive health risk.
Right. Poison oak requires full personal protective equipment and very specific chemical applications just to be safe around it.
Okay, so for the critical threats, like the English ivy taking down an oak tree, how does a professional arborist bypass that waxy leaf cuticle without poisoning the entire yard?
Through a highly technical process called base severing, combined with a targeted chemical application.
Face severing.
Yeah. An arborist doesn't try to rip the vine down. Remember, that causes wounds. Instead, they carefully sever the main vascular stems of the vine at the very base, just above the soil line.
Just cutting the trunk of the vine.
Right, using surgical precision to avoid nicking the host tree's bark.
And they just leave the severed vine hanging in the tree.
Yes, they leave it alone. They allow the upper portion of the vine, that entire massive structure clinging to the canopy, to slowly wither and die on its own.
That makes sense.
As the vine dies, those deeply embedded aerial rootlets dry out, they shrink, and they naturally loosen their mechanical grip. Only once it is entirely dead and brittle can it be gently removed without tearing the bark or the masonry.
But wait, severing the base, like that just triggers that Hydra effect we talked about, right? The roots in the ground are going to explode with new growth.
Which is why the chemical application must happen within seconds of the cut.
Oh, instantly.
Instantly. Instead of spraying leaves, professionals apply a highly concentrated herbicide directly into the open, fresh wound of the severed stem.
So they're bypassing the waxy leaves entirely.
Yes, they are utilizing the plant's own biology against it. The freshly cut vascular tissue acts like a biological pump. It actively draws that localized poison down deep into the root network.
Yeah.
It kills the massive energy vault entirely from the inside out without a single drop of chemical ever touching the surrounding soil.
That is incredible. Using the plant's own plumbing system to deliver the knockout blow.
It's very effective.
But let's say, the homeowner didn't catch it in time. The ivy won, the tree was starved out, and now we are dealing with a dead or dying giant in the yard. The sources go deep into the mechanics of diagnosing a failing tree before it becomes a literal catastrophe.
Yeah, and diagnosing a tree requires looking past the obvious. You have to read the structural geometry and the biology of the plant. A tree won't just fall over without warning.
It gives you signs.
It leaves clues, yeah. If you are looking at your oak, you have to look for canopy dieback, where the highest branches are completely bare of leaves.
Right.
You have to look at the base of the trunk. Is the soil actively heaving or cracking?
Yeah.
Because that indicates the massive root plate is failing and literally tearing out of the ground.
That sounds terrifying. And the sources also mention looking for fungal growth on the trunk itself. Seeing mushrooms growing on the bark feels like a massive red flag.
Oh, it is the ultimate biological warning sign. Fungal fruiting bodies, mushrooms, only appear on the outside of the trunk when the fungus has already colonized the inside of the tree.
So if you see the mushroom, the damage is done.
Exactly. They are actively consuming the structural lignin and cellulose that give the wood its strength. The inside of the tree is basically rotting away into mush.
And this leads right into what the sources call the rule of timber, which explains the terrifying physics of what happens when extreme weather hits that rotting wood.
The rule of timber comes down to one thing: moisture content. Healthy, living timber is full of water. Its cellulose fibers are saturated, which allows them to flex, bend, and absorb the massive kinetic energy of, say, a Southern California windstorm.
It bends, it doesn't break.
Exactly. It adapts to the environmental pressure. But dead timber has lost all its moisture. The cellulose fibers are hollow and brittle.
So what happens in a storm?
When high winds hit a massive dead oak canopy, that energy cannot be absorbed by bending. So the wood simply snaps. It violently fractures under the pressure, turning thousands of pounds of dead wood into a massive falling hazard.
So a dead tree is a huge physical liability.
Huge.
But the sources also describe it as a biological liability, basically saying a dying tree is contagious.
Contagious is the perfect word. It creates this ripple effect across the entire landscape. A tree under severe drought or vine strangulation stress emits chemical distress signals.
Like it's calling for help.
In a way, yeah. It releases specific compounds, mostly terpenes, into the air. But aggressive pests, particularly bark beetles, have actually evolved to detect these exact chemical signals from miles away.
So they smell the terpenes, and they know the tree is too weak to fight back.
Exactly. The tree can't produce the sticky sap needed to pitch the beetles out. So the beetles just swarm the stressed tree, they bore right into the bark, and they multiply rapidly in the decaying wood. Very, but the problem is, once they fully consume that tree, they don't just disappear. The localized population has now exploded, and they systematically migrate outward, attacking the surrounding healthy vegetation.
Oh, I see.
Leaving one dead tree in your yard acts as a biological incubator for an infestation that can literally sweep across an entire neighborhood.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Let's say I look out at my yard, I recognize the soil heaving, I see the fungal growth, and I hire a professional to remove this massive dead tree. Doesn't completely removing a huge biological structure disrupt the local ecosystem? I mean, shouldn't we leave nature alone?
It's a common question. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, removing a compromised giant is actually an act of ecosystem preservation.
How so?
Arborists refer to it as spatial management. A massive dying tree is essentially a biological black hole. It continues to hog physical space and whatever limited soil moisture is left while providing zero ecological benefit.
So by taking it out, you're redistributing the wealth.
Precisely. When you extract a declining or overcrowded specimen, you instantly free up essential soil moisture, nutrients, and most importantly, canopy space.
For the other trees.
Right. The remaining healthy trees in your yard are suddenly relieved of that intense competition. They no longer have to grow lopsided or unbalanced, trying to desperately reach around a dead giant just for a patch of sunlight.
So they can grow straight up.
Exactly. Spatial management allows the remaining trees to develop symmetrical, structurally sound root and canopy architectures, which makes them inherently more resistant to those high winds.
So to pull all of this together and really distill the key takeaways from John Constantine's field notes, The beautiful creeping vines on your wall are not quaint decoration.
No, they aren't.
They are incredibly aggressive biological chisels that wedge your masonry apart and trap rotting moisture against your house.
And we've learned that allowing those vines to climb your trees leads to a slow, methodical strangulation. They steal water from the roots, they block sunlight from the canopy, and they add a massive sail-like weight to the branches.
Right. And if you find yourself in this turf war, put the gardening shears down. Tearing them rips off bark, cutting the tops triggers that Hydra effect of rapid root regrowth, and spraying the waxy leaves is just useless chemical pollution.
Totally useless.
It requires the surgical precision of base severing and localized vascular treatments.
Ultimately, it comes down to reading the geometry and biology of your landscape, recognizing the subtle structural warning signs like understanding why healthy wet wood flexes and dead dry wood snaps is just an essential part of responsible property ownership.
You really have to look closely at what is happening out there. It's a slow motion battle, but the physics and biology literally never stop.
This raises an important question, though. We've spent this entire time looking at the hidden, compounding structural decay caused by a charming, incredibly slow-growing plant.
Yeah.
If a simple, decorative vine can secretly compromise the architecture of a massive oak tree, or a solid brick foundation over years of invisible compounding pressure, what other slow, seemingly harmless, charming habits or processes in your own life or work are slowly accumulating weight and choking out new growth?
Wow. That's a heavy thought.
It's just something for you to mull over the next time you're walking down the street and you stop to admire a beautiful, timeless, ivy-covered wall.